From its inception and for an entire century, the United States operated under the concept of manifest destiny. This concept was to overspread the entire continent and to develop, economize, and solidify government and liberty. From the Louisiana Purchase in 1803 to the Hawaiian annexation in 1898, the government effectively acquired the lands that comprised the American West through treaties, war, and purchasing. The first significant land acquisition of the West was through the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. 3 men worked to purchase territory west of the Mississippi River to the Continental Divide. Livingston, Monroe, and Marbois negotiated with Napoleon of France, who had gotten the land from Spain, for a purchase price of $15 million. The Louisiana Purchase, seen here in green, doubled the size of the original 13 colonies overnight and gave the United States the valuable Great Plains. The Great Plains area is known as the breadbasket of the world because the region produces so much agriculture and food. The purchase of this territory would motivate President Jefferson to launch the Corps of Discovery, in which Lewis and Clark explored, mapped, and recorded information about this newly acquired region. The next significant territory that the United States acquired was the Oregon Territory. The land that was gained in the Oregon Territory makes up present-day Idaho, Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, and parts of Montana and Wyoming. The Oregon Territory and the Pacific Northwest was a desirable region for the fur trade. Many countries held an interest in this area as the seal, sea otter, and beaver were plentiful there. In the 1740s through 60s, Cabrillo claimed the entire coast for Spain, and other countries like Russia would stake claims as well. In the late 1700s, an American, Captain Gray, discovered the Columbia River while trading for furs and developed a trade route that began in New York, sailed around South America, north to the Pacific Northwest, then to China for Oriental goods. This trade route would then start over and would ultimately be a 7-year endeavor. Although many countries held interest in the area, the British gained control of the Oregon Territory after what is called the Nootka Sound Incident in 1790, during which Spain abandoned claims to lands north of the 42nd parallel. By 1805, Lewis and Clark had reached the Pacific Northwest and set up a military fort, Fort Clatsop. The Pacific Fur Company also set up trading posts in the region at Fort Astor. Americans were not able to retain control against strong British forces during the War of 1812, and throughout that time British held the region. During the Mountain Men era of the 1820s and 30s, the British realized that the desire for beaver pelt was causing Americans to push into the Northwest. They came up with a plan to hunt beaver out of the area, hoping that this would end American interest in the Oregon Territory. Unfortunately, the British plan was set in motion too late. By 1825, the Mountain Man Rendezvous system was in place. This, along with missionary work and the Macedonian Call, Americans began heading west in droves. Americans had won the race of the West by this time. President Polk's political campaign of 1844 to 1846 was one of expansion and manifest destiny. His slogan was 54-40 or fight, which was a threat to the British that if they did not acquiesce that territory to the United States, there would be a war. Finally, President Polk settled with Britain to extend the 49th parallel to the coast to avoid any fighting, and the United States officially acquired the Oregon Territory, seen on the top left-hand side of the map in yellow. Next was Texas independence. In 1821 to 22, many Spanish colonies would rebel against Spain, including Mexico. Mexico gained their independence in 1821 and invited settlers to the Tejas region under 3 conditions. Immigrants must learn Spanish, they must convert to Catholicism, and they must pledge their allegiance to Mexico. Americans that settled in the area called themselves Texicans, and by 1863 they were chafing against the criteria and the Mexican presidency of Santa Anna. The Texican rebels were led by men like Austin and Sam Houston, as second-chance politicians. In San Antonio, Texas, Americans revolted against Mexico at the Alamo and lost. At the same time, Texas revolutionaries were meeting at Washington on Brazos and drafting a constitution to divide themselves from Mexico and become a republic. Although Santa Anna held many victories against revolutionaries, he was eventually defeated by Houston's forces at San Jacinto, seen there on the bottom right-hand side of the Texas Territory and negotiated with Texas revolutionaries in the Treaty of Velasco. The four conditions of the Treaty of Velasco were: Texas would gain independence from Mexico, Rio Grande would be the border, all Mexican troops would withdraw, and Santa Anna would be freed. Due to slavery issues, Texas would not be immediately admitted to the Union. For 8.5 years, Texas would be an independent republic called the Lone Star Republic, before finally being admitted to the United States in 1845. Following the Texas independence was the Mexican secession. After Polk secured his presidency, and he had secured the Oregon Territory and Texas, he set his sights on California. In pursuit of expansion and manifest destiny, Polk provoked Mexico in a border dispute of the Texas region, which had previously been settled in the Treaty of Velasco. The Texas revolutionaries had secured the Rio Grande River as the border between Mexico and Texas, but Mexican President Santa Anna refuted this border, claiming the Nueces River as the official border between the two countries. The area that was being disputed was a mere 100-mile stretch, and Polk used this as a way to claim land south of the 42nd parallel after Mexico refused to sell the land to the United States. During the Mexican-American War, disgruntled Mexicans in the California Territory called themselves Californios. In 1846, they staged the Bear Flag Revolt. During this revolt, the Californios were able to seize the area of Sonoma, California, for a week until American forces took control. The result of the Mexican-American War was the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which stipulated the Mexican cession, paid Mexico $15 million and forgave debts owed, and gave the United States the right of transit in Mexican territory. Ultimately, the United States gained 525,000 square miles, the 42nd parallel south to the Rio Grande and east of the Continental Divide. It was 55% of Mexico's land, and in immigration issues, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo is still hotly debated. Shortly after the Mexican cession, while Mexican President Santa Anna was still recovering from his loss to the United States, James Gadsden negotiated the Gadsden Purchase. In 1853, the Gadsden Purchase secured land in the Arizona and New Mexico areas for the purpose of a southern route for the Transcontinental Railroad. Santa Anna agreed to a $10 million price tag for the region, and Mexican citizens were so disgusted with this deal that they kicked him out of his presidency for the final time. In 1867, Russia agreed to sell the area at the northwest tip of North America to the United States, claiming it was an economic wasteland. Secretary of State William Henry Seward, under President Johnson, negotiated with Baron Stoded a $7.2 million price for Alaska. Americans called this purchase Seward's Folly or Seward's Icebox because they saw no use for this land, that is, until gold was struck in Alaska in the 1890s. On the right-hand side is a political cartoon showing how the Americans felt about that purchase at the time. Lastly, in the 1890s, the United States would acquire the final piece of the American West by annexing Hawaii as a territory. In 1893, the enlightened monarch, Queen Liliuokalani, wanted to establish a new constitution. This revised constitution would restore power to the monarchy, but American business elites strongly opposed the new constitution. American citizens in the territory formed the Committee of Safety to protect U.S. citizens and their interests, and the U.S. military sent in troops to enforce neutrality. The result was a failed monarchy, as the Committee of Safety and U.S. military forces dethroned Queen Liliuokalani. In 1898, Hawaii would be annexed as a territory into the United States of America, completing the conquest of the West.